Hi students. This week we're going to shift focus to talk about the charity, NGO, and nonprofit sectors. Now, unlike government that we talked about last week, this is everything else that sort of exists that's not private business. And I'll explain a little bit more about the unique challenges that actually face this particular industry sector. It would be a very interesting and worthwhile place for you to consider working in because if you are the kind of person who likes to make the world a better place or have a real impact on the quality of people's lives in all kinds of different formats, then working for a charity or working for the NGO sector or nonprofit is very, very worthwhile, and you can get a lot of skills, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. First, I just want to introduce the sector. Who are the main players and how does it work? Then we're going to talk about fundraising and donors and that kind of environment, advocacy and campaigning, and then finally I'll talk a little bit about brand reputation and identity, all within a PR context. So what is the NGO sector? Well, NGO stands for non-governmental organizations, and these are basically organizations that have the aim of changing socioeconomic, environmental, or cultural circumstances for people and communities. They work outside of government and they're generally not for profit. So they're not selling products to make money. They're not in the private sector, as we talk about. They actually contribute to what we call civil society through not working for profit, but working instead for change. Now, what is civil society? Well, you've basically got the public sector, which is anything related to government. You've got the private sector, which is anything related to private businesses that are in business to make money and make profit. That's their goal. And then you've got civil society, and then you've got crossover between them. But essentially, civil society is really anything that surrounds sort of making the world a better place. So that could be health, community, human rights, justice, the arts and sport sectors. It could be outside of government. It could be political organizations, religious organizations, environmental, disability, race, gender, etc. So there's countless ways that the NGOs and public sector or NGOs and charity sector work, but it's basically they work in the realm of civil society. So what kind of goals do these organizations have within civil society? Well, again, if you're looking at all of these different topics, animal rights, public health, women's rights, human rights, the environment, etc., arts and culture, the first goal that these companies or organizations have is to increase coverage of the issue. So whether that's violence against women or animal welfare or the environment, their goal is to increase awareness and to get more coverage about the issue itself so that people are aware that there's a problem that needs to be addressed. They're also very interested in increasing capacity. Basically, this means raising money so that they can increase their coverage. So they need funding, and because they're not selling products, they need to generally raise their money that they use for their campaigning through fundraising campaigns. And then in this way, they can increase the capacity, they can increase the exposure of what they're doing. And then finally, their goal is going to be in communications. And now this can take many forms. It can be social and media relations. It could be about data-led journalism and the creation of infographics and statistics. It can be also websites, policy papers, responses to government, writing case studies. All of that sort of falls under the realm of PR. In fact, all three of these falls under the realm of PR. So if you think about coverage, it's about increasing awareness and increasing reputation. So working with the media and working with social. Capacity, fundraising, talking to donors and actually using promotional campaigns and PR campaigns to raise money. And then finally, communications about what they're actually doing with the money that they raise, as well as communicating out the need for more money. So really, really heavily reliant on public relations practices within this industry. And now the reason why they're more heavily reliant on PR than anything else is because they're charity. They don't actually have a lot of money, and so they have to find very cost-effective ways of actually doing all of this work, and PR is the most cost-effective way because it's earned rather than paid for. And so PR ends up actually acting as the backbone behind most of the activities that the charity sector undertakes. So let's talk about a couple of challenges that face this particular sector in general. First is financial sustainability. Now, obviously, because they're not in the business to make money, they're in the business to raise awareness and to change people's perceptions and to improve the world. They need a constant flow of money to do so, and they are going to be heavily reliant on donations and fundraising in order to do that. So it's depending on where the economy is and depending on how successful they are with their outreach efforts is going to dictate how much money they make, and that could differ from year to year, which is going to have an impact on how much work they can actually do in the sector. Finally, next, another challenge is reputation and media coverage. It's a very, very crowded marketplace, and many players are fighting each other for exposure. And it's harder and harder to actually get free coverage without paying a great deal of money for advertising. So charities find it very difficult to compete in the marketplace of ideas, because not only are they competing against other charities in their sector, they're competing against charities more globally, and they're competing against the private sector for our attention. So for example, if you ran a climate change charity, not only are you competing against other green organizations who want to educate people about climate change, you're also competing against organizations for cancer and for violence against women and for disability rights and for all of the other charities that are out there asking for money from people. They're all in competition with each other, even though they're not exactly the same thing. And then they're also competing with the private sector that is also now, and as we'll talk about later, the private sector also gets involved in charity work. So, the message is, it's very, very difficult to kind of cut through that message and actually get that media coverage and improve their reputation. They also have a very difficult job of what's called stakeholder communications. Now, stakeholders are anybody who has a stake in that organization. And if you're a charity, that's going to be your fundraisers and your donors. It's going to be your suppliers, your employees, but it's also going to be the people that you're helping with the charity. So for example, if you were working for a violence against women charity, then the women that you're actually helping are also your stakeholders. So you have a very complicated communication environment where you're trying to market to people who could potentially give you money, inform the people who already have given you money about what your activities are, inform all of the people that work with your organization about what it is you're up to, and then also inform the women that you're working for about the fact that you exist and that you're there to help them. So it's a very multi-layered communication environment where you've got a lot of different stakeholders with different needs that you need to communicate with on a regular basis. There are other challenges around issues of transparency. Because the money is charity and it's driven by fundraising, charities are expected to be completely transparent, which means they have to be open about how they spend their money. They're not a private organization that can simply sell you products, earn them profits, and walk away, and you have no idea or no business even knowing what they do with their money. In fact, charities have to actually be very transparent, and a lot of charities have gotten into a lot of trouble in the past when they make their budgets available to the public, and people will see that they are spending a lot of money on marketing, for example, because advertising costs a lot of money, and consultants and agencies cost a lot of money. But in order for them to build exposure, they need to spend that money. But people have been very upset with certain charities because they'll look at, for example, this is a cancer charity, but only 30% of the funds raised are actually going towards cancer, and 70% of it is going towards marketing and administrative fees and whatever else. it kind of looks like a scam. So that's not in all the cases, but the point being is that charities have to be completely open and honest about how and where they spend their money. And this means that they're under a lot of scrutiny about making sure that the money is spent wisely and that people are actually still believing in what they're doing. And then finally, the biggest challenge that they're up against is competition and what's called donor fatigue. Now, this again means that, a climate change charity might be competing with a cancer charity, might be competing with a Save the Whales charity, and we're constantly bombarded by requests to donate money, and people get a bit tired of it after all, and it can sort of set in where you're just thinking, God, not another charity. I'm done giving. And it generally, people will have a certain threshold where they're willing to donate to causes that they believe in. But if you're inundated too much, if you're asked too many times by too many charities, you stop giving altogether. So how do charities actually struggle with that? How do they manage to convince you that you can still give a little bit more and that it should be to them? And how do you overcome this sort of sense of donor fatigue? It's very, very difficult for them. So you can see that it's a very challenging environment to work in. But again, if you're the kind of person that has a passion for something that can make the world a better place, it could also be a very worthwhile and rewarding sector to work in. Let's look at some of the PR strategies that you would use if you were actually doing a fundraising campaign. So these are actually strategies that you would use to actually communicate with your most important target audience, which are going to be your funders and your donors, the people who are actually giving you money. The first is that you need to raise awareness that the organization exists. So you need to be able to understand who might be most interested in your charity. You need to target them with messages that you are there and that you need to make them aware of the kind of work that you do. So again, it's a simple awareness campaign and informing potential funders about your organization and what it does. Another major part is going to be to have events, fundraising events, and also experiences. So once a donor actually gives money, maybe they're invited to an event where they can network with other funders, or they're given an experience that is specific to that charity. Something that helps link them emotionally to your brand, essentially, and something that's going to be low cost but very experiential, and that they walk away with memories and they feel good about the fact that they just donated to your organization. A really big part of working in PR for charities and working for any brand, frankly, is going to be market research. You have to understand what your funders' needs and motivations are so that you can understand how to reach them at that emotional level, to give them the kind of messages that are going to be the most effective in actually getting them to fundraise. You also have to do a lot of outreach and relationship management. This is going to be partnerships with other organizations. It's going to be constant sort of managing the relationship with your funders, people who have already given, making sure that you're constantly communicating with them on a regular basis about the things that you're up to as a charity. And again, making them feel like they're part of your community through communication. So this constant sort of outreach as a way of keeping your funders engaged is going to be a really important part of any PR activity for this sector. And finally, fundraising campaigns. This is, what it says on the tin. It's getting out there. It's doing fundraising drives. It's making people aware that certain times of the year especially are the best times for giving. So certain charities like Movember in November is a way of raising money for men's health, prostate health, and mental health and suicide amongst men. I think, I'm not sure about the UK, but I know April is Cancer Month in Canada. So April is always a big month where there's a lot of campaigning, a lot of awareness raised about that issue. So, certain times of the year, there's a real fundraising drive by charities to really get out there, get noticed, increase exposure, and frankly, get people to give as much money as they can. Now, in terms of raising money, there's a couple of key sort of ways that you want to do this if you were working for a charity. And these are just some ideas. There's going to be a lot more, but this is essentially how PR might work in the context of actually raising money. The first is that you emphasize affordability. So it's about really, anyone can afford £5 is more than enough. Whatever you can afford to give, we're happy to take, essentially, is the message. So even small amounts make a big difference. The second is to make it as accessible and easy as possible. All you have to do is give us your bank number and we'll do a direct deposit or direct debit every month. Or here's a bucket, with strategically placed volunteers on the high street. All you have to do is put your spare change in. Making it very easy, sort of low interaction, just kind of getting people where they are and being able to reach out to them in a way that makes it as easy as possible for them to donate. Showing the impact of the work is always very important. So people like to know where their money is going and they like to know exactly how it's helping people and how it's making the world a better place. So the creation of videos and photography, case studies, writing stories, sharing those stories with the media, and really kind of showing the behind the scenes a little bit in the media about what your organization does is going to be really important to being able to increase exposure about it. The use of advocates is also a really important element. So again, these are people who are generally directly affected by your charity. So if you were a charity for, let's say, a children's charity, you could actually have children act as advocates going around talking to media about how the money was able to help them have school lunches or get through school, something like that. Or if you had a charity for rescue animals, animals might be hard to act as actual advocates, but you could actually have the owners who have adopted these pets, and you could have them go on media and talk about their experience in having a rescue and how worthwhile it was for them. So the idea is that you want to get the people that are the best affected by your work and actually put them out in front to tell your story. You want to be able to show the combined effectiveness of all of your programs. So if you've got several programs going at once or several ways that you spend money as a charity, it's about showing the aggregate, which basically means showing them all together, showing the power of actually putting everything together and how much difference you can make in the world. Influencers and authority figures are always useful, and there are many, many charities around the world that have taken on board celebrities as a way of being the face of the organization. One that springs to mind is a water organization bringing clean water into remote communities around the world. Matt Damon is a spokesperson, and he does a lot of videos and a lot of publicity events supporting this charity. Excuse me, there's many other charities around the world that have found a celebrity or an authority figure that they can use that will help increase their exposure. Another thing that you've got to do is you've sort of always got to test, right? You've got to test how effective you are, see what messages work, see what raised the most money, and then make adjustments as necessary and then go back out. So it's a constantly evolving, constantly changing way of doing things. And then finally, it's about getting out in media and making sure that the key issues that you address, whether that's climate change, violence against women, the treatment of people with disabilities, suicide prevention, mental health awareness, whatever it is, it's going to be your job to try to keep that in the public domain, which basically means making sure that you're there to actually give quotes, offer interviews, offer background information, statistics, case studies, evidence, whatever it takes. Your organization is at the forefront of having information readily available about this key issue so that when a journalist calls, your organization is the one that they call, and because they know they can count on you for good information. And then you get exposure through the media as a result of that. So you can see that PR is, there's lots and lots of ways that you can communicate your value proposition and lots of ways of working behind the scenes to actually make sure that you are constantly getting awareness and getting the money when it's needed. I just want to talk a little bit about advocacy and campaigning because those are the areas where these charities operate. Advocacy basically means fighting for a cause, and campaigning, you know what that means. It means getting out there and raising awareness. There's basically three types of groups that operate in this arena. You've got pressure groups, and these are groups who are designed, these are charities and organizations that are designed to put pressure on government or corporations to actually change their behavior or change the laws. And so they're really there to actually apply pressure to big institutions to try to change. Then you've got insider groups, which are generally have close links to government, and they will sort of advise and consult with government before changes to legislation are made. So this is going to be medical associations or any organizations that are actually quite close to government, working alongside them and advising them. And then you've got the most visible groups, which are going to be called outsider groups. And these are the ones that really rely on campaigning, publicity stunts, usually very innovative or disruptive techniques designed to get media and public attention and really get people talking about the issue. Now, the best example I can think of for this would be a group like Extinction Rebellion, which have really put climate change on the radar in a very big way in the last 2 years, and they've done so through a lot of disruptive sort of publicity stunts, etc. So these are sort of the general groups that are there actually providing pressure constantly and are out there working. Depending on the kind of organization you work for, that would depend on the kind of tactics that you would use as well as the kind of audiences that you would target. There's one other area I want to talk about, which is cause-related marketing. Now, this is where the private sector gets involved. So you could also find yourself working for a charity division of a private sector company. Many companies have divisions or departments. Many, especially large companies, have departments called corporate social responsibility. That's something that you'll learn a lot more as you go through your degree. But generally what that means is that they partner with an NGO or a nonprofit to publicize an issue and to raise money through the sale of products. So Tom's Shoes is one kind of example where every time you buy a pair of Tom's shoes, another pair of shoes famously gets bought for someone in need in a developing country. But you could also have major brands like brands from Unilever, like Pampers, selling nappies, where every time you buy their product, they will donate money to a cause. So, and in order for this campaign for this to be effective, they actually put a campaign and advertising and PR around it, and everybody wins because the charity that they've partnered with gets the exposure. The brand also wins by selling more products, and consumers who might buy these products anyway feel really good about their contribution because they're helping to make a difference in the world by buying products they would have bought anyway. So this is sort of an area outside of charity and NGO PR, but it is definitely worth talking about because it's an area that's very big, and you could find yourself working for a private company that is still very much involved in charity. Let's just talk a little bit about the difficult balance that these charities have to strike. It is very tricky to maintain a very salient, good reputation in the industry. And again, there's so many factors, as I mentioned, about raising enough money, not appearing to spend too much, etc. So doing good work and actually doing what you say you're going to do. It's a constant juggling act to maintain a solid reputation. It's also the main focus of these organizations tends to actually be around marketing and fundraising. And most people who get into charity work would really rather do the work of saving the planet or making the world a better place. And they don't really want to do the work of marketing and PR and fundraising. But unfortunately, in order to do the good work, you need to raise the money. And so marketing, aggressive communication of sort of the mission and aggressive sort of drive to raise more money constantly ends up being a more important task than the work itself. And that can lead to a lot of burnout for people working in the sector. And then finally, again, it's this very difficult balance of having to exist in the brand marketplace and be susceptible to the competition around what private sector brands are doing. And it's a very crowded marketplace of everybody vying for a piece of the pie. And you've got donor fatigue, and you've got big brands that have tons of money that can make a big impact. And if you're just a small charity, it's really, really difficult. And then also, you don't want to appear to be spending too much on marketing, even though you're supposed to compete in that very expensive marketplace. So, a very delicate balancing act that these charities have to go through. And it's quite difficult when it comes to sort of understanding how brand reputation and identity really fit in this sector. Now, that's not the case for what we call NGO super brands. And you can see from the list of brands here that there are some major, sometimes multinational and international brands, such as the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, Oxfam, WWF. These organizations are just as big as some of the biggest corporation brands in the world, and they operate on a high political influential sphere where they have a big impact on the way the world runs. They also have teams and teams of communications professionals that operate sophisticated multinational communications plans. And, it's a multi-million, sometimes billion-dollar endeavor to raise money for some of these big super brand organizations. Again, their biggest issues are going to be operating as a brand, building issues, awareness, customer loyalty, marketing. And again, if you could get into one of these companies, it would be an absolutely fantastic job. You would learn a lot. You would feel like you're making a difference in the world, but you would also be operating at a very high level in terms of your marketing, advertising, and PR portfolio. So that's it for this week. As you can see, it's quite a complicated sector. And what I would like us to do to better understand how it works is I want you to choose your charity. So go out to the industry, look around, find a charity that really resonates with you about the kind of work that they're doing. It can be large or small, local or multinational. And I want you to do a little bit of research on, what is their actual mission? What are they trying to accomplish? How do they raise money? Have a look at some of their campaigns and identify some of the tactics that they use to raise money. And see if you can dig a little bit below the surface to look at some of their annual reports or their financial statements to identify how much of their funding actually goes to marketing. If you can bring in any examples of kind of really innovative or neat campaigns that you've seen, I'd really like to be able to share that with the class. We're going to be spending the most of the time on class this week talking about this, and because I'm really interested to see what kind of innovative charities and campaigns you're able to bring in. So that's it for Charity, NGO, and Nonprofit PR. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I look forward to discussing it further with you.